very good afternoon and warm welcome to all delegates who joined us today on the virtual platform for Day 2 of the Livelihood India Summit 2021. We will be starting with a technical session on invisible farmers, women in agriculture. This session is being held under track 4 discussions on building a sustainable ecosystem for farmer-producer organizations. Our apologies for the audience for a 10-minute delay that we faced due to some technological issues. Starting off with the session, the Government of India in the economic survey stated that the agriculture sector in India is undergoing feminization. In the face of shrinking opportunities in agriculture, men farmers have been migrating out, leaving the woman behind to take care of the farm. Recent statistics reveal that women constitute over 42% of the agricultural labor force. However, they own less than 2% of farmland. Women in agriculture continue to remain invisible. The absence of land rights not just keeps landless women and female agricultural laborers on the fringes, it also denies them credit, insurance, and a host of agriculture-related schemes. Keeping this in mind, we look forward to the session throwing up some solutions to these issues that we are facing. With that, I would move to introducing the panel. We are happy to have the most distinguished panel with us today. It is my pleasure to invite Nancy Sahai, CEO, Jharkhand State Livelihoods Promotion Society, and Sejal Dunn, Executive Director, Anand. This session will be moderated by Dr. Sanjeev Phansalkar, Sector Expert. Dr. Sanjeev Phansalkar is a fellow of IIM Ahmedabad. He has taught at IRMA for a number of years. He led program team of Sir Dorabji Tata Trust from 2007 to 2014, and he has a host of publications, including books and articles in his name. Before handing over the session, I would request the audience to interact as far as possible with our panelists today and send in their questions on the chat box. With that, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Sanjeev Phansalkar. Welcome, Dr. Phansalkar. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayuk. I would like to begin by thanking Access Development for holding this session and for inviting me for this purpose. And I am delighted that I will be participating in this session along with some very distinguished lady colleagues, Ms. Sejal Dand and Ms. Nancy Sahai. Mayuk in his introductory comments has already kind of indicated the broad canvas. The title, Invisible Farmers, Women in Agriculture, begs a question in my mind: invisible to whom? I mean, anybody who has had any brush with rural reality, women farmers are not invisible. I mean, in fact, in the farms, nobody other than women appear to be present today. If you travel in a very vast tract of this land. Now you go into Bundelkhand, you go into Uttarakhand. I mean, that's a classic. In Uttarakhand, you just don't see a male at all on the farms. You just see only women. So you go to Uttarakhand, you go to North Bihar in the Kosi Plains or wherever, you go to Jharkhand in the tribal area, you go to Madhya Pradesh, you go to virtually any part of these lands in this country, and you will see only women on the farms. So they are not invisible to those who bother to look at them. And of course, one of my colleagues in the panel had objected to, not objected, but kind of differed with my point of view. But the classical, how shall we say, complete neglect of the female voice could be seen in the farmers' agitation. You must have seen these photographs of well-built, and if one may use the term, burly farmers with turbans and beards, representing the farming community. And I kept looking at these images to see, is there any woman anywhere in this? Knowing fully well that half, if not 3/4, or perhaps 85% of the farmers in this country today, by farmers I mean those who actually farm, are women. And not a single, at least in the photographs that were flashed about on the Delhi, Sanghu border and other places. And I'm sure women must have expressed their views, whether in support or whatever, of the farmers' agitation elsewhere in other forums. But, you know, it's like not being noticed by the mainstream live media. The live media, the social media or the national media generally focusing exclusively on the men. And one even heard alleged cases of misbehavior with women among these louts who kind of took advantage of the farmers' agitation and the crowds there. So where were the women? And why did the farm lobby consider it completely appropriate to more or less relegate women to a very secondary position? So they are not invisible to government. They are not invisible to You and me, they are invisible, A, to the media, it would appear, and they certainly are invisible to the so-called farm lobby. Now the question is, what exactly is the proportion of women? Now I'm sharing this from my, I mean, it's not really quoted data anywhere and so on, but from my broad observations, I'm saying something like 70 to 80% of the work in agriculture virtually everywhere is done by women. Barring tilling of the land and such other work which requires heavy or with the work which there's a superstition. Other than that, virtually every other task is handled by women. Obviously you don't expect ladies to go and irrigate land when the power comes only in the night or some such thing. But otherwise, virtually every other task. And therefore, I'm saying, and Veena Agarwal 40 years back had noted this and substantial part. But I think the proportion of work that's done by women has been only increasing, if anything. I think almost 100% of the work in the animal husbandry sector is done by women. If you talk about poultry, you talk of dairy, you talk of goat rearing, if you go to any kind of animal husbandry, and the entire work is done by women. I would imagine 90% or upwards of the work in the vegetable cultivation is done by women. Perhaps all work done by vegetable cultivation is done by women. And I keep going into the villages, I keep visiting, I keep traveling, I keep interviewing. So I know the work is done by the women. So they are the farmers. And as Mayuk in his introductory comment was saying, men simply can't afford to remain in farms anymore because the land sizes, 85% of the land holders are small and marginal farmers, and it's just not possible to earn enough money to live with dignity in the income that you can get out of these marginal lands. And therefore, men have to migrate to earn money so that their children can be educated and so on and so forth, leaving women to do the farming. And yet, I am yet to see, and I'm very honest about this, I am yet to see a single advertisement of an agri-input company which features a woman farmer. So wherever, whether seeds are being marketed or fertilizer or pesticide or whatever, you see a man with turban and mustaches, as if the only farmers in this country are women. Forget about farm implements and equipment and stuff like that. Of course, there it is presumed. And a long time back, a scholar had written about the situation of women, and she had talked about what she said, inside-outside dichotomy. That women are concerned with all that is inside the home, and men are concerned with, or at least alleged to be concerned with, what lies outside the home. So it would appear that this inside-outside dichotomy extends to agriculture as well. But interestingly, and this is the last point, and then I'll kind of raise a few questions and hand it over to my distinguished colleagues. The last one. These days it's rage to talk about natural farming, organic farming, regenerative farming, and so on and so forth. And I have not seen a single man dealing with the smelly stuff that you need in order to do any kind of natural farming. When it's a task of collecting cow urine and cow dung and boiling it and doing all the messy stuff, and it's so horribly smelly. I'm not condemning all this. I'm sure they kind of improve the quality of soil and it's wonderful for your and my health and so on. But the stuff that you need to use, all these Panchamruts or Jivamrut and Brahmastra and Agniastra and so on, and so they are so horribly smelly that the only way people think that they can become natural farmers is to make their women folk do that work of collecting the urine, collecting the dung, boiling it and smelling it all the time. And in fact, it's a shade worse than that. It's the women of the Dalit communities who willy-nilly are forced to do the work required. So it is my sustainability at your labor kind of a situation. And I can go and give talks about sustainable agriculture, but all the labor that is needed to be done is done by a Dalit woman, or at the most in my household, maybe by the women folk in my household. So that's the kind of situation. So maybe the inside-outside dichotomy plays out. Maybe the women don't have land rights. Maybe the agri companies consider it, I don't know whether they consider it appropriate to advertise with women as the sort of models to be shown in the advertisement for agri inputs. Whatever be the reason, but women as farmers have not come to occupy the primacy, the importance, the center stage which they deserve given their contribution to agriculture. There are a few questions which I would like to ask. One, why, other than sheer patriarchy and its hangover, why are women invisible in agriculture? Invisible to the farm lobby, invisible to the economists perhaps. I don't think economists have done fair amount of work. And in fact, Mayuk was talking about, but when I was leading IMI Tata program, one of my colleagues had come out with this inference about the feminization and the senilization. Feminization and senilization, which means the dominant workforce was becoming women and the dominant workforce was becoming older in agriculture. So that was 2005 or 2006 or thereabout. So it's been known for a long time among economists, among researchers, that women are the dominant farmers. But to the policymakers, perhaps they are invisible. Yeah, even now all schemes are, even when they are written up, are written as though the farmer is a man. So why are they invisible? That's the first question. Second, how does it matter? Does it matter? And to whom does it matter? Does it matter to the government? Does it matter to the advertisers? Does it matter to the market? Or to whom does it matter? It certainly matters to the women. There's no question about it. As Mayuk was saying, very little land is owned by women, and correspondingly, therefore, they would not get. And when the crop insurance or schemes like that are linked to women, and therefore, if I don't own any land, then I won't get crop insurance, and so on. Similarly, I would not get any crop credit, and so on. So, to whom does it matter? And third, very interesting question. Ms. Shah here leads Jharkhand State Livelihood Promotion Program, and they work largely through women's self-help group. And we know livelihoods these days, and for quite some time, I'm sure to come, livelihoods will be farm dependent or farm related for quite some time. Now here you are trying to promote livelihoods through dominantly a women's organizations, which are self-help groups on the ground, and their village organizations and cluster level federations and so on and so forth. All these are almost completely women organizations. But the base asset on which you want to build the livelihoods are owned by men. And therefore, there is always a hiatus. I mean, if you give a loan, if you give a scheme, that you can give it to the woman, but she is going to use it on an asset which is owned by her husband or whoever. Is there a hiatus? Is there a problem there? So how do they deal with that problem? That's the third question. So first, does it matter? Second, to whom does it matter? And third, how do you deal with that when you are dealing largely through women's organizations? And fourth, of course, is the implicit question, what can be done about it? I think that's where I will stop. And I'll invite Ms. Sejal Dan first. She's been leading Anandi, and that's one of the most reputed organizations engaging with women's issues and livelihoods in Gujarat. And I wonder whether they have extended to other states, but when I knew them last, they were in Gujarat dominantly. So Sejal is talking from her hard experience on the ground. So please, madam, all yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev. It's been a pleasure to be here. Let me structure your question on what is it, who are they invisible to, and what is it, does it matter if they're invisible, and what can we do about it? We've been engaged with rural women for over now 28, 30 years of my work has been with rural women, but it's only been since about 15 years that we started to look at why should we assert the occupational identities of women. I probably not answer these questions in your in the order we said, but I was just trying to put together some slides, and I want to just share some images from this slide. So thank you, Sanjeev. Anandi continues to be work and based in Gujarat, but we've been working with lots of national rural livelihood missions, state missions intensively. Earlier, we did work in Bihar and Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh largely, and with the Mahila Kisan Sashakti Pariyojana and their partners, to look at how do you actually look at gender transformative agriculture policy. And since 2014, there's a national forum and big alliance of organizations from the women's movement, agriculture, forest rights movement that have come together, and we call ourselves Makam, Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch. And I'm going to be probably speaking a little bit of both the experiences. And I think just to reiterate the point, are you able to see my slides?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yes, I am able to see, yes.
Okay. So who are they invisible to? Because the policy actually is gender neutral, and it actually recognizes not only farmers, but it also recognizes a wide range of farming practices. So the current policy in India, at least, the last stated policy on who is a farmer is fairly clear. It recognizes it does not predominate land ownership in farming. It recognizes a lot of agriculture production, land, water, with commons, with small ruminants, large ruminants, to fall into this large ambit of agriculture. So the policy actually at least doesn't invisibilize women. Why should it matter to us? I think for two reasons. The largest sector of women workers are women farmers. And if this largest sector of women workers, given are in agriculture, are women farmers, then we should be looking at what is their status, and we recognize their contribution. But they're also the largest safety net against hunger. These small and marginal farmers, the forest produce collectors, the ones who forage from the commons, that continues to be the largest basket of food available to the largest vulnerable sections of our population. So women are not only producers, they're procurers, but they're also almost all the time your surveys are showing that the processing is largely done by women to convert this into food and nutrition. And I think if you're looking at the climate change and the associated risks, then because these women have been dependent on these resources for so long, then they have a greater stake actually in actually protecting and preserving these resources. So if we have to deal with multiple sort of crises of looking at hunger, nutrition, and not only looking at production, we do have a distribution problem, and we have a huge problem of nutrition. And it is indeed tragic that it is this very women and these very households that are probably most food insecure. And all the concurrent development indicators on morbidity, mortality, health, education, safety, security. And therefore, for me, why are we talking of women farmers, and why is there such an urgency to address it? Comes from actually having to deal not only with the largest sector of workers, but also the largest vulnerable populations. And of course, if you did a social analysis, you would still find that Dalits, Adivasis, they are largely in the agriculture labor, landless labor sector, primarily engaged in this occupation. I think the second part is that we always still acknowledge women's labor, but we are not acknowledging the knowledge. If we are looking at agriculture knowledge just passing on from generations, there is a gendered notion, and women have been protectors of a lot of biodiversity. And they do possess knowledge. Might be different from men because their engagement is different, but they're actually also extremely skilled. It's so common for us to find a woman, an Adivasi woman, who can name 47 bhajis that she can collect and forage in the winter months, which are nutritionally rich. We know seed preservers and biodiversity through plant seeds. There's an immense amount of knowledge there. Also, how do you actually, the large set of labor that Sanjeev talked about, very truly, everybody's talking about agroecological practices, natural farming, they're extremely labor intensive and of course smelly, and they can be very, very, so this zero budget I don't understand, because the cost is women's labor, but it's also associated with a large number of women's knowledge of what to grow, when, where, what progressed or not. And I think that's where the idea of not calling them women in agriculture, but women farmers, and there was a lot of debate whether Mahila Kisan is a misnomer because a Kisan is a gender neutral term. But Mahila Kisan और Mahila Kisani, ये दोनों की पहचान बनाने के लिए जरूरी है that we actually now have to kind of qualify and say these are not women in agriculture, because the word farmer actually associates itself, it's an occupational identity, and other than incomes and wages, it also talks of knowledge and skills. And that's where the claim is going. Very quickly, invisible to whom, while the policy may recognize it, the construction of OLA program schemes, whether they be with the state or with the civil society, we still are fixated with the notion of this male breadwinner and therefore the head of the household, and therefore women are therefore seen as this unpaid, underpaid, assumed to be agriculture workers, but not as farmers. So women are seen as not primarily to have resource rights, nor the right to decide on the resource use. And therefore, very quickly, even a program like Mahila Kisan Sashakti program will speak to women farmers, but you would on the ground see NGOs then engaging with the men to take decisions on kya ugega, kaise ugega. This entire effort that the SRNs are putting in on Nutri Gardens, Ocean Vatikas, it's amazing that one of the big things that the women are talking about are how have they to negotiate within the household to give them a small piece of land to practice, to put into play their practices, to actually decide on kya ugega, kaise ugega. And this is all given at the level of testing. Okay, you try it, but we'll watch you, whether you fail or not. So this is very, very critical. And I think if we have to change this at the program level, we will have to work around this of how are we going to change this. And I think we know that, and exactly what Sanjeev said, whether we look at any entitlements of direct benefit transfers, they be for inputs, they be for Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Yojana, for Fasal Bima Yojana, you look at ENAM, APMCs, FCIs, everybody is only recognizing the land. So you completely, all sharecroppers, lessees, and a large section of women cultivators are therefore completely out of the system of getting any kind of direct support. And so even if you're looking at DBT transfers later, this is going to actually be a great challenge to overcome if we have to invest in women farmers. Just a small example, Telangana tried out and they've completely shifted a large number of procurements to SHGs. But what are the SHG women getting? They're actually getting a local market, which is very good. It's a huge, big jump that you actually have a local market at the village level. But you're actually getting only commission. Even they have not been able to move, that the payments are made to their memberships, although they have a vehicle for it. They have bank accounts, they have SHG groups, they have federations, and to make the payments to the women who are actually giving them the produce. They're still having to give it through the FCI to the man's accounts. And I think lastly, there's a very male-centric view of actually viewing agriculture just in terms of economic value. And I think Mahila Kisani talks of food and nutrition value. And that's where the big transformations of when we say women farmers and women farming, that practices first, you're talking of transformational aspect. Very quickly, I know I might actually have lesser time. Sanjeev, do flag me with 2 minutes. So I'll quickly wind up and then we can discuss in the questions. I think one of the big things that Anandi has been doing, whether we do it with our own communities or we've been doing with technical assistance to NRLM, to Pradhan, many like organizations, is an assertion of women themselves. महिलाएं खुद अपने किसानी के काम बहुत गिनाएंगी. दीदी 5 बजे से उठ के रात को 12 बजे सोते हैं, पर मुझे अपने आप को किसान कहने में हेजिटेशन हो रहा है. मैं अपने आप को किसान नहीं कहती. So unless that changes, and that's where perspective building is so critical, that we get the women farmers to recognize their contribution, their knowledge, and their skills. And we talk of this triangle in 3 ways. That you talk of social identities, they're very, very critical. And within that, single women, marital status is so critical. Then the other is the political identity. What are my spaces for decision making, setting agendas? And they'll be very, very small. Nah? where do I start with? मैं पंचायत की सदस्य हूँ, मेरी cluster level, मेरे SHG member की अध्यक्ष हूँ, मेरे SHG की. All these are political identities and spaces which help you negotiate this. And only when you do that will you be able to negotiate your occupational identities and say, this is not the work I do, this is who I am. And of course, this is underlaid by this large burden of unpaid work, which is not only domestic work. We understand in India, a lot of our unpaid work is really livelihood work, which requires investments in infrastructure. Water you're not only fetching for yourself to drink or your household, but for the cattle, for the small ruminants, for everybody. Even with Ujjwala, we are still largely dependent on fodder and fuel, biofuel uses. So we really have to talk about what infrastructure requires prioritization. But we understand this, that this is a perspective that we will on the ground have to build with rural women for them to start asserting their identity and negotiating their claims. You can only do that much top-up. I think rights over resources, we've already talked, Sanjeev talked about land, but associated to land are all your water rights. So all your irrigation, access to irrigation, access to irrigation bodies, cooperatives, governance institutions, they're completely governed by your land ownership. And now in this age, we have to talk of information, media, digital media also as very, very critical resources, and there are huge digital gaps in it. So we've always been talking, don't mediate it through the household, talk of independent, effective rights for women farmers, independent rights. मेरी household की identity के सिवाय मेरी occupational identity में are we able to create that? मैं SHG की सदस्य हूँ, क्या एक महिला किसान जूथ की सदस्य हूँ, जहां पर ये बातें होती हैं, जहां ये challenges की बात होती है, जहां मुझे negotiate करने की ये मिलती है. Land rights has been a critical area. We've all been working hard. On the ground, it requires dedicated support. You have to negotiate two things. Please realize, A, poor women have to negotiate the state. Even succession is very expensive and corrupt. And the other, information. So you go from land literacy to access, control, and then ownership. And this cycle keeps changing generation to generation. So on the ground, the most effective practice across everywhere. Even if Govind was here, she would have talked about their Landisa's experiment, Swabhumi Kendra, Working Group for Women's Rights, Anandi's Lok Adhikar Kendra, Madhya Pradesh Sarkar has a land rights and literacy program. You require champions because you have to negotiate the state and you have to negotiate social conditions. Even a simple panchanama for everybody to waive off a right to get the woman's name entered is a huge challenge. So you require gender land rights champions and a cadre of dedicated women who can do it. Focus again on single women and those most vulnerable to dispossession. In this agriculture census, we are seeing much greater dispossession of women's land rights of the most poor from the Dalit and the landless. And of course, we shouldn't talk of only land rights. We have to talk of governance rights to the commons because they're a very, very important source of livelihood. So whether they are commons in the village, water bodies or forests, the legislations help us, but translating these legislations requires dedicated CRP, community resource person who can accompany and negotiate socially as well as this, and therefore it can't be done without collectives. So he's right that we can't do this without women's collectives being able to negotiate this space. Lastly, I think we often talk about agriculture and we don't realize even today, this picture of Nandaben tilling her field is unusual because even today, if the woman take a plow in most parts of the country, they will be subject to very intense violence by the entire community. Now, at the simple level in the 21st century, if we don't have a law that can forbid it, we don't have campaigns to do that, we don't have strategies for resistance, visibilizing this, then it's a huge challenge. And we will find a range of such practices, including what kind of farming task can be only women's. So you have a weeder, like weeding is technically a woman's task, seen as a halka task. And you'll have technology, which you'll go and see at Lothal, the Harappan site. 3,000-year-old sickle design hasn't changed. You have standing weeders, but where do you find them in the common market? So both reduction of drudgery technology. You might have this little islands that will create technology, but you don't have a mass scale adoption of this. And I think lastly, you cannot have women farmers occupy a space unless there is a political space for engagement with a variety of institutions. Because farming is not only about production on the farm. For women's farming, it's from the farm gate to the homestead, the entire process, then the processing and the homestead. And therefore, her rights as a citizen and her engagement with a lot of institutions, with the bank, with the market, with the Atma, with the KVKs, with all the social protection measures. So we are using, I'm showing you all the tools that we use for training because I find it most effective way to communicate. You have to talk of land rights, you have to talk of water rights, you have to talk of resources, digital information, also entitlements, a whole range of all the iKisan portal schemes, which also have to undergo change. But this is on the ground what we do every day, holding hands of women to claim this, to find where there are blind spots, work with the policy and identify gaps. He was right, there is not a single big marketing company that advertises agriculture inputs, which is women farmers face. But Madhya Pradesh Sarkar मंत्री अभी किसान भाई और बहन कहने लगे, क्योंकि मकाम जैसी संस्थाएं वहां पे प्रोटेस्ट करती हैं, हम लोग alliances में. And looking at finance and investment, I want to say a very small thing here because you very critical actors here in the Livelihood Summit. We have completely left this entire thing to microfinance, to SHGs. That was supposed to be an entry into becoming credit-worthy to get mainstream finance. So you have a Kisan credit card with full interest subvention that can be available. It's also available in policy to landless women. But how many women farmers can access it? There are no targets set. All priority sector lending is going through SHGs and you're paying huge costs. So you can't invest in your own land or even the land that you're tilling, in your equipment, in your assets without this. Markets, there's a range of markets. Now there are digital markets, but you need local markets. And if we don't forget, lastly, I can't emphasize enough the need for social protection. Unless women farmers are recognized and have occupational identities, they're completely bereft of any social protection right that a worker is entitled to. Whether it be
you might like to, you might like to conclude.
Yeah. So I think I'll finish here. So lastly, I would say, how would you gender transformative agriculture? We're not talking to policy, we'll talk of practice, but if that comes up, what do we need to do? We'll talk of it there and I'll end.
Thank you. When somebody is doing work on the ground and the voice speaks with the strength of the experience on the strength of the experience that you have, and that was a very nice. One might almost call it a kind of sweeping overview of the issues that are involved in women farmers. And I correct myself here. I was about to say women in agriculture, but well, I need to learn, and I'm learning hopefully. So women farmers. She talked about the fact that women are not only farmers, but they're also food processors. They certainly are looking after the livestock, but they're also the resource users so far as natural resources are concerned, but nowhere do they control the resource, nowhere do they appear to have the authority of doing decision making. Now, I'll just give one small piece of kind of digression perhaps, but that tends to show how blind we tend to be. So she was talking about increasing the agriculture productivity and the fact that woman is working from 5 in the morning till maybe 8 or 9 or 10 in the night, including work on the agriculture and at home, and all of that is productive work. Now, improving her productivity could very well also be productivity improving implement. We did a lot of, when the place where I work, Vikas and Waste Foundation, we did a lot of research on what women do in using their body as a kind of mechanism for transporting stuff, whether it be water or fodder or fuel or whatever. Women are beasts of burden, to put it very, very crudely. And men folk are quite happy about using women as beasts of burden when they try to load stuff on their back and women carry them from the farm to home and from jungle to the home and things like that. But there is an implement available for virtually each one of these tasks. There is a water drum. PVC water drum which can roll and you can bring water. And there is, of course, the wheelbarrow on which you can carry stuff. But why don't we consider these as productivity improvement tools? No, gender transforming agriculture to me is a kind of medium term, if not long term reality. I'll put it this way. I don't expect, I mean, I'm not particularly young, but I don't expect it to happen in my lifetime. You know, the force of patriarchy I see as too strong. But then in the meanwhile, can we at least go one step and say, recognize these as productivity improving tools so that the women's productivity on the farm improve, and then consequently the impact it has on agriculture as a whole and so on. She also talked very importantly about the women acquiring the kind of politicized identity as women farmer, and then subsequently influencing all manners of policies and schemes which are meant for the benefit of farmers. This case of Kisan credit card versus the SHG loan was very, very interesting example which she gave. Thank you so much, Sejal. Now I shift to Ms. Nancy Shah, who, as I was saying, heads the Jharkhand State Livelihood Promotion Society, and therefore she has the view from the top of a livelihood implementation organization. So let's listen to her. Ms. Shah, please.
Yeah, very good evening to all of you, to all the eminent panelists here in this virtual Livelihood India Summit 2021. And I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Nancy Sahai, and I'm 2014 batch officer of the Jharkhand Cadre. I belong to the Indian Administrative Service, and I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Jharkhand State Livelihood Promotion Society under the Department of Rural Development. And it's an honor to be here, and it was great listening to the earlier speakers, and I would just like to present and maybe speak on some of the issues and observations more importantly in my tenure as the CEO JSLPS. I have been into service for the last 7 years and have served in different capacities in districts of Jharkhand in the state headquarters. But this current tenure of mine, this current posting and this current job of mine has given me a very clear and a very, I would say a very, has given me a lot of clarity about how women farmers have been been working, and how the self-help groups have been able to make their position and have been able to strengthen their position in the society. Speaking of Jharkhand, Jharkhand has 24 districts, and we as JSLPS have been working in Jharkhand since 2009. So it has been 12 years of JSLPS, and it started with a few blocks and few districts, but right now our presence is in all the 24 districts in 195 blocks of the state, and we have around you may say 2.8 to 2.9 lakh groups, SHG groups with which we work, and that's around touching 33 lakh households of the state. If we speak of agriculture, agriculture is till date and still one of the most important livelihood avenues, most important livelihood opportunity, which even JSLPS concentrates on. We are into high value agriculture. We are into different kinds of agricultural practices. We have around 18.35 lakh, if to be very precise, SHG members who are directly linked with the farm activities. Now these farm activities range from various kind of agroecological practices to livestock support, to small ruminants, to fishery support, organic farming, micro drip irrigation, and we have a huge number of schemes. Some of them are Government of India funded, some are state government schemes. We have a very important and a big project called JIMD, which is basically a micro drip irrigation scheme, and that's funded by the Japanese government. The JICA funds it. So these projects have helped us over years to get more and more women in form of SHGs, VOs and CLFs to come forward and take up agriculture, high value agriculture, and also horticulture. I mean, to be very clear, I mean, Jharkhand is more of a horticulture state, what I understand lately, because there is scope for different kinds of fruits and vegetables. Our weather and topography, demography, everything supports horticulture a lot. So that is one sector where we are entering into, and we have groups, huge number of groups, huge number of women who are doing these kind of horticulture cultivation in the state, and have been able to do really good, and some of their products and some of their crops are even being exported. So coming to JSLPS, we being the state rural livelihood mission, the few of the projects, as I mentioned, apart from that, we have this Mahila Kisan Sashaktikarn program, which basically focuses on the medicinal plants, which basically focuses on the non-timber forest produced products. We have pigeon pea value chain, the scented rice value chain, tamarind value chain, lemongrass value chain. So these are some areas where we have explored, and quite large number of families and quite large number of women groups have also been involved, are involved in this and have been doing great. One important initiative of the state government, which I feel has helped these women farmers do better in the last 1.5 years, is the launch of a state brand called Palash. We have a specific brand called Palash, which was launched an year back by the state government, and it started with 10 products, which are majorly the edible items like rice, dal. We are into spices, honey, mostly these agricultural products. And as on date, we are right now producing and selling around 64 products under Palash. And the good part and the good thing to maybe mention here would be that right from collectivization to the branding to the selling of these products is totally done by these women. So वही वो चीजें collect करती हैं, उनकी sorting करती हैं, उसको process करती हैं, उसको package करती हैं, branding and the selling. So, and we have around 300 Palash marts across the state where we are selling these products. And this has also been quite appreciated by the government of India, and we have also recently done an MOU with Amazon and Flipkart, wherein these products have gone live. And by January next year, the coming 2022, we expect all our 64 products to go live on Amazon and Flipkart as well. So that is how we are helping them to get market as well. Whatever they are growing, they are processing, they are branding, and then they'll be able to sell it in the marts, in the local marts and the local shops, and also will be available online. So that is how we are trying to get them on board. Ma'am Sejal ma'am was talking about the banking, the credit, the banking part. So even in Jharkhand, we have done this thing that around 4,400 women are being employed and being used as banking sakhis. These women themselves are providing door-to-door banking services to the rural households. And they're also helping in the credit linkage and in getting financial support to our groups who are involved in these various livelihood activities related to farming and agriculture as well. We have around we have this organic clusters in Jharkhand, which are now being promoted, and around 272 organic clusters are there across the state, wherein we are trying to promote the concept of organic farming and getting these products also certified organically, so that we can even expand our sale and the expansion of these products which we are making under the Palash. Among these women, the SHG groups which are there, we have a concept of this Ajivika Krishi Sakhi. Now these Krishi Sakhis, there are around 17,000 Krishi Sakhis in Jharkhand right now, who are their main role is basically to mobilize these women for farming. They give them technical support as well, training to these women on new practices. We have a mobile app wherein there is an digitization of the record of implementation. They're also giving them organic farming support through this participatory guarantee system, collectivization and marketing of producers, and also extending the support of the agriculture department with which we work in convergence to these SHG members. So that is primarily the role of these Ajivika Krishi Sakhis, and they are our SHG women only. Similarly, in the animal husbandry sector, we have the concept of Ajivika Pashu Sakhi, who mobilize these women and also give them technical support in the management and preventive remedies and vaccination work, like vaccination, deworming in poultry and goatry activities. And also they have established a huge number of hardening centers for chicks for income generation and expansion of the activities. So these are some of the activities with which these Ajivika Pashu Sakhi are involved. Also, we have a World Bank funded project called Johar in Jharkhand, which is being run in 17 districts. And the major focus of Johar is to create FPCs. We have around 21 farmer producer companies, and most of them have been doing tremendously well. And right now they have a combined turnover of around 70 crores, and we aim to achieve 100 crores by this financial year end for these FPCs. So and these are totally women based. The director to the treasurer, the entire activity of the SPC is done by the women farmers only. So that has been very encouraging, and we intend to replicate this model in the rest of the state as well. So that is the important role which has been played by these groups, these women, our own community women cadres. And I think agriculture in Jharkhand has been traditional. Horticulture is coming up, and women are a very, very major part of these activities which are being done. And I would again like to mention and talk about Palash, because this has been a very big game changer, because they have an assured market. All our government supplies are being linked to this Palash, as in to give them an assured market. Our state government has taken a policy decision that whatever supply has to be done in government institutions like jails, in schools, the midday meal, the food which has to be provided, or eggs which have to be provided in these schools, or maybe the welfare residential schools, or the hospitals, any other place where these edible items are needed, will be supplied through the Palash brand. So that gives a big boost, that has given a big boost to this entire concept of agriculture and horticulture being done in the state by JSLPS. And JSLPS has been instrumental, and we are in the process of having even more improved technologies. We are going for selection of technical support agencies for providing the latest technologies, the latest services available to these women on farm, so that they can produce the best, they can get the maximum income out of these activities. So that is what I wanted to maybe brief about the work being done in Jharkhand. And thank you again for having me here.
Thank you, Nancy. There is a question which is posed to you by Mr. Badrinarayan Sahu from International Center for Agriculture for Agroforestry, ICRAF. He asks, do you think having more effective women in agriculture impacts nutritional security? So that's a question that has been posed to you. Maybe you would like to respond.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is very important. And in fact, I would like to mention two initiatives which we have taken recently in convergence with MG Narega. We are going for cultivation of moringa. And moringa has been identified as one of the most important ingredients of nutrition, which can be used for children, for women, for having better nutritional standards. And we are into even an MOU with the education department, wherein this moringa will be purchased, processed, will be processed by our groups, and we are going to make moringa cakes, which can be used for the school kids, and also dried moringa and moringa leaves for use in the midday meal, which is there in the school. Secondly, we are into already we are doing it. We are into an agreement with the education department again for supplying eggs. All the eggs in the poultry, our women have formed big cooperative societies, and they are into these poultry federations who are which are providing the eggs which are being produced by these groups to these schools for the supply as again to midday meal. So that is one very important sector where we are working, and we wish to scale it up to other products as well. So these are two examples where I feel we are already being able to showcase that, and especially women being a stakeholder herein, it gets more relevant that the nutritional security of the society is taken care of.
Thank you. So Ms. Shah has been most informative about how the JSLPS has been promoting women farmers and their business in Jharkhand, and the steps pertaining to linking them to things like Amazon and Flipkart are certainly very progressive steps. And I do hope that the back end of adequate production and kind of making products market friendly in terms of good sound packaging, etc., would be taken care, and that would really bring in a lot of consumer rupee in the homes of these poor women in Jharkhand. So it's a very wonderful presentation Ms. Shah has made. Thank you so much. Now, the third speaker who was meant to be for this panel, Dr. Govind Kelkar, is unable to join. So we do have a few minutes available to us, and I'll turn back to Sejal and request her whether she would like to kind of elaborate on what she said on any particular point which she feels needs kind of elaboration or emphasis. So we could take some more time, and then I would make some concluding comments, and then we'll stop. So maybe Sejal, if you have any comments.
I think it is so wonderful to hear Nancy speak, because I caught two things. One is it's important to organize. So organizations of women farmers and collectives of small and marginal farmers, whether they be at the informal level through their village organizations or FPOs, is critical first to voice and recognition and markets, as she very ably illustrated. So investment in organizing. And there is where I feel, Nancy, the FPO is one route, but for even other farmers, women farmers, to access other rights, that's really critical for me. And NRLM is one mode. It's reached a large number of households, but we need this to be done across by all, especially e-Shram cards. Could be one avenue. You're giving e-Shram cards. Are we ensuring that all this, technically by definition, all women would be rural women would be farmers? Under policy, are we actually enabling that? And therefore then opening up, once they're registered as a farmer, it opens up my access to entitlements, which can be delinked from land. The second point I'd like to kind of say is that it's true, technology doesn't need to be high end. I mean, we're not looking at mechanization, because we have to look at technology that will still give livelihood support. You don't want to displace labor. Right? And Manrega is a very good case where we wanted to build assets also, apart from providing immediately wages. The Moringa example is a good example, but we need completely this with a very large participation of local employment coming from women. We recognize that women farmers, small and marginal, are not only farming, they've also to do wage labor and other kinds of occupations. So recognizing this, we must create more and more avenues where there is paid income and move this whole farming from the unpaid work on this. And I think lastly, I think the challenge is, while we all talk of agroecological practices, organic farming, we don't know how to support it. We don't know how to support it other than training. And we're not able to give women the space on it. So I think a strategy that has worked on the ground is, of course, the agriculture extension workers, where they failed completely. Krishi Sakhis, Pashu Sakhis, getting women who are knowledgeable to promote the practice for paying fair and decent wages and not making it piecemeal. So NRLM can pilot something, but ultimately the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Rural Development, they have to make and acknowledge the investments that have been made in these women and turn them into full-time workers. So you still have the Gram Sakhas, and in the digital economy, you need to invest in the skills, and then you need to create the forums to be able to do that. And lastly, I think Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, they're both very good examples of giving women all the Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, I know, कि गांव का सारा तालाब, गांव के common property resources, forest access, the primary resources for production have to be given to women, and the governance of these have to be given to women, for which you need an institutional space. I think there's so much contestation on it that unless we actually protect this basis of the resources on which women's livelihoods are there, we won't get far. So these are my thoughts on it. Is you cannot empower agriculture or actually deal with poverty or climate resistance unless you create this organizing space and institutions of women, which then look for social transformation. And this has to be aided by law and policy. And all the gaps that I'm saying in it, we need to address it collectively as a country, because we must not forget that these producers are the most malnourished and the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shah, would you like to make any additional comments?
Yeah, thank you, Sejal ma'am, for your inputs. And as you said, there are certain challenges with respect to concepts like organic farming or the other aspects which you talked of. But as a state, we are trying to do as much of convergence as with the Agriculture Department, and in also with the support of NRLM and other organizations as well. We are trying our best to get these issues resolved. And one thing which I missed out in my presentation was we have started this Jharkhand Millet Mission, wherein we have certain districts in the state where we have a good number of PVTG women. These are belonging to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and they are traditionally into cultivation of these millets like bajra, ragi and stuff. And so we are trying to support them, again getting them under the Palash brand, and trying to diversify millets and the products made out of that to ensure nutritional security to our women and our children. So that is another initiative which the state government has taken. And I mean, it's a pleasure to listen to you and get your inputs here. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there's any more question or any comment in the chat. So what I will do is I'll kind of move towards winding up the session with the consent of my esteemed colleagues on the panel. I see the two major issues that I would like to kind of bring to the table here. The first is, as the saying in Hindi goes, hak मांग के नहीं मिलता, हक छीनना पड़ता है. So women farmers, they may cry hoarse to asking for the rights. It's not going to happen. It's very comfortable for the men and the policymakers to allow the men to continue to enjoy those rights. But the question is, will that happen? Will women assert the rights? And here I have a, shall we say, an ambivalent observation, which is that in numerous research exercises, when one goes and talks to women folk and so on, whether in the presence of their husbands or not, when one asks, who does this work, who does this work, who does this work, almost constant refrain is sab milke karte hain. The woman is as if she is almost afraid to say my karti. She doesn't want to assert. And this is, and I have no axe to grind. I mean, I'm not saying that I have any particular reason to suppress the reality. But that's what is that I guess is because of the socialization that women are kind of drilled to believe that they have a certain role in society, whether and they should stick to that. I mean, that seems to go counter to the need for them to assert as being farmers. And I'm sure both of you are far more learned in regard to these matters than I am, but I'm just sharing some of my observations. So till that happens, till that situation changes, till the time when women do not feel diffident about asserting their rights, till that time, probably we will be talking more in the normative than in the positive. We'll be talking about this should be done, that should be done, etc., rather than asserting that this has got to be done and there's no more patience left with us kind of a thing. Till such time, and as I was saying earlier, that the force of patriarchy appears to be rather strong at this juncture, and possibly compounded by the fact that there is a socialization of very, very large number of women into believing into the nonsense of inside-outside dichotomy and things like that. And because of this combination of these two factors, things are going to take a little time. And during this time, perhaps one will have to move at least consistently, if not, what word shall I use, radically or transformatively, at least consistently and incrementally, towards ensuring that the productivity, that the economic contribution of women to agriculture keeps rising, so that the overall agriculture productivity improves and the size of the pie improves. And therefore, the ill effects of malnutrition and overexertion and excessive physical strain, etc., which seems to be the current fate of women farmers, that situation will change over a period of time. So I think this is what I would like to say. And with this, maybe, Mayuk, we would conclude. Because there don't seem to be any question or anything in there. So I'll, with the consent of my two lady colleagues, I'll hand it over back to Mayuk. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for a wonderful session. Despite the initial hiccups on the technology front and missing out on a speaker, we had a really interesting conversation today. You talked about the need to prioritize the need for spaces for women to organize and to introduce systems for institutionalization. And we also had a lot of inputs from the ground on the wonderful work that is being done by the government, by the state governments, and also highlighting the need for the critical need for convergence across ministries and stakeholders towards progress, the incremental but yet continuous progress that the moderator talked about. So thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Phansalkar, to you also for so brilliantly steering the conversation today and coming up with these crisp conclusions. With this, I would like to thank the panel and the speaker. And before ending, I would like to also take this opportunity to thank all the delegates who joined us today online for this virtual session and for sending in your comments and questions. With that, we end the sessions for the day. And we come to the end of the summit, Livelihood in the Summit as well. This was one of the last technical sessions. Some other parallel sessions are going on. So we are happy to report on a very successful summit this time with lots of participants joining on the virtual platform. And with that, we would like to end. And before ending, we would also like to remind the audience that we'll be live streaming the award ceremony later in the evening at 6 p.m., where we'll start with a fireside chat. Participating in the fireside chat will be Madam Neel Kamal Darbari. And following that, we will be having the award ceremony. So please join us back at 6 p.m. for the live streaming of the award ceremony and the fireside chat. Thank you once again, not just the panelists for this session, but the panelists and the moderators across all the sessions that we've had over the last couple of days. And thank you all the audience who have joined us on this platform. Thank you.
Okay.